So hello, everybody, and welcome to the History of Diving Museum. For those of you that are here for the first time, let's get a raise of hands. Excellent. All right. Thank you for being here. We say don't drive by, dive in. So if you didn't have a chance to see the exhibits before our presentation tonight, we are open daily from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and we encourage you to come back. My name is Lisa Mongilia. I'm the executive director for the History of Diving Museum. We do immerse yourself presentations on the third Wednesday of every month and have been doing it. We are celebrating our 20th year. So other than occasionally, because of unknown circumstances beyond our control, we have been here 12 presentations a year. So thank you very much for being here. We also have a group on Zoom. And if you would in the chat, let us know where you're from, how many people are with you. And if you have any questions, put it in the chat. Julie is going to be monitoring it and she will be bringing in those questions at the end of the presentation. So for those of you, we encourage you to become a member. You can come in free 362 days a year to see exhibits and bring friends. We also have free guided tours with your paid admissions once a month. And actually this Saturday, Julie is going to be doing some guided tours at 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. So with your paid admission, just an added value. It's normally a self-guided tour. You can meander through the exhibits, but this gives you a little bit more background information. It's going to focus on Earth Day and Rachel Carson, William Beebe, some of those early pioneers that in conservation. And then next time you have people in town, you'll be like a tour guide, and then they'll be so happy because you'll be able to give them a lot of background information. It makes it more fun and interactive. And then after the tour, you can go back through at your own pace and see some other things that you may not have had a chance to concentrate on. So we invite you to, on Saturday, come to that or check our website and see the annual schedule because we do it once a month on either a Saturday or a Sunday. If any of you are in town, we have some valuable volunteers. Thank you, Susie, for coming tonight and being our greeter. If we are going to be having some volunteers come in tomorrow to help uninstall an exhibit and get us ready for the next one. If you're in town and have some time, we'll do one and dones, or we can do it on a regular basis. So contact me, let me know what your interests are, and we'll go from there. Next month, we will be having Dan Orr. He will be our speaker. For those of you that aren't in the diving industry, he was the president of Divers Alert Network. He's now retired. He's a consultant, and he's written a couple books, several books actually. But he'll be here for our ribbon cutting for our 20th anniversary exhibit, and then be our Immerse Yourself speaker next month. But tonight we have Dr. Cori, who is up from the Key West Arts and Historical Society. She is the curator, historian. She's a great asset. We almost got her 10 years ago, but they got her instead.
You lucked out. No, I'm kidding.
But our organizations collaborate together when we can, and I appreciate all the input because the society has been very helpful with me on a lot of our local research as well. But she'll be talking to us about Hemingway and some of his exploits in the Keys. So thank you for braving and coming up from Key West yesterday, or excuse me, today, after doing your bounce back and forth. And if you have any questions, again, we can, if you want, we'll hold them till the end.
Whatever you want. I'm pretty easy.
She's fluid. Okay.
I'm fluid. Yeah.
All right. That's a good thing to have at the History of Diving Museum.
I was going to say I'm a maritime historian, so being fluid is part of the gig. I think.
Excellent. All right.
Well, thank you for having me come visit with you tonight. I was excited when you the History of Diving Museum reached out and asked if I would come up and like, do you have anything that's fish related that you want to come talk about to fit in with our theme? And anytime somebody asks me that, I instantly think of Hemingway. And because he's a fisherman, but he's so much more than that. And I'm delighted. I've done this talk a couple times when we've had folks come in we have Hemingway days every July, and we get a bunch of Hemingway lookalikes. You probably see the papers, or they're all running around Key West chasing a fake bull. And my big gripe about this, I'll just start with my gripe and I'll move on, is that when Hemingway is in the Keys, he's a very young, attractive man. And then by the time they have a lookalike contest, all they get is the old Hemingways come down and run around. So I'm an advocate for young Hemingway lookalike contests, but, and some fishing exploits. But they really do. I bless them for coming down and keeping the spirit of Hemingway alive. They do, fishing competitions, and they give money to local charities, in particular marine resource management. So we're always happy to have them. But so tonight I'm going to talk about Hemingway and his fishing. And really, this is going to take us not only in Hemingway and Key West, but I also want to show you where he gets this idea about preservation and being a good steward of the environment from a young age. So I've got some great photos of him when he's young, and where he gets his background from and why he is such a good advocate. And I don't think he's well known as an advocate for conservation and recording data and sharing that information year in and year out. So that's one of the reasons I enjoy doing this talk, is I don't think he gets credit. I think what he's known for is that real, machismo, boisterous person that he is, writing books and going on being war correspondents, but he really cares about the Keys environment. So that's one of the reasons I like to do this talk. So I'm going to start with Ernest Hemingway as this tiny, cute little baby. So Hemingway's, I want to give you some background because it really does, I think, give you a good sense of where his stewardship comes from. So Ernest Miller Hemingway is born in 1899. He's born right outside of Chicago, in a pretty affluent suburb of Chicago. His father, who I'll show you a picture of in just a moment, is a doctor. His mother is a music teacher. They're sort of movers and shakers in their community. But Ernest, doesn't, and not this young, because he wouldn't understand it at this young. They certainly, the affluent suburb was very conservative for Hemingway. He didn't love being there. Anytime he could get out, he would, and he enjoyed it. And that also included his parents had bought about 200 feet of lakefront property in Lake Walloon up in Michigan. And the family spent a lot of time, especially when they were really young. He's one of four, at the lake. That's where they were most of the time, and fishing and hunting and all sorts of things. So I think Hemingway really enjoyed and took to heart those experiences up at Walloon Lake. And they bought a cottage, and they built a little cottage up there for the family. And I'll show you some of those pictures because, again, I can't stress it enough that I really do think that he's such an impressionable child in understanding his environment and respecting his environment. And that doesn't always come through in a lot of the Hemingway literature, I think. So this is just a picture of his parents, Clarence and Grace Hemingway. So you can see, quite an affluent family that he comes from. But this is another, just I think, a very youthful photo of Ernest. This is up at what they called the cottage Windermere, and on Lake Walloon. And so this is a picture of Hemingway here with his little basket. And they would spend summers, and anytime there was nice weather up there, the entire family would go up, and they would do all the things you would do at a cabin. And I think, so fishing is really part of his life from a really young age. And because he's in a family, he's one of four, he's in the middle. So I think he gets left out a lot. So there's a picture of the whole family with the four kids. And I can't do this because it's on a TV, but there's Ernest with probably the world's worst haircut, and really did not care for his parents very much for giving him that haircut, but he's over there on the right-hand side. But he looks uncomfortable. I mean, who wouldn't be? And it's not just the haircut, but this is not the lifestyle that really Hemingway is ever going to embrace, these affluent suburbs and parties and having people over. He loved being at that lake house and wrote to his friends about it. His mother kept, she was very doting on all her children. She kept a lot of scrapbooks, and not just images, but so much information about what they do on these day-to-day activities when they're up at the lake in particular. And you get a real sense of the freedom that they have and what they're doing. And so because they live on the lake and it really was lakefront property, the dad, Clarence Hemingway, was very, he was kind of militant in a lot of ways. And we'll see that as we're kind of talking about Hemingway in his youth. But I mean, Hemingway recalls like when they were kids about the dad doing, like, because they had a little, like a little dinghy to go out in the lake so they can go fishing or swimming and things. And Hemingway remembers like his dad made them do lifeboat drills every single day before they would go out, and he hated it. He hated it. But I think that really does, whether he would ever admit it, it certainly left that impression about being a responsible boater. Being out on the water, you're not only responsible for yourself, you're responsible for your younger siblings when you're out there, even though we can see you from shore. You need to be able to handle yourself and respect the nature that you're in because you're not smarter than it. I think those were good life lessons for him. This is the family. This is their little cottage off to the side there. I just think it's a sweet little family photo. This is when there was only two of them. So Ernest is the smaller one, also with the worst of the two haircuts in there. But these all come from the mom's scrapbook. And again, some of these are just really darling. This one came out of her scrapbook. You can't see it on the screen here, but it says Ernest Miller Hemingway, 3 years old at Windermere with his sister. So this is their little dinghy and the sister and his older sister. And again, just kind of reinforcing this idea that he was always with a fishing pole. The miserable child on the left is also him. And he develops these talents with rods and reels, and his dad would prefer to take him all the time when he would do these exploits because he really had a natural talent for it and an affinity for it as well. Okay, and then just the other one from this scrapbook, because I love the caption the mom puts on this. It's the lone fisherman, just 2 years old. Wow. I know, right? So that's Ernest just out on the log on this lake. Again, really just a sweet view of this, how ingrained in his DNA this all was. Okay, now the clicker works. Okay. And he's into writing, so he's going to start blending these things together. This comes out of a Bruce family archive. The Bruce family was very good friends with Ernest and his second wife Pauline when they lived in Key West, so they have this in their personal family archive. But I love here where it's the third paragraph down. My favorite sports are trout fishing, hiking, and shooting, and football and boxing, like all of which he's going to love forever. He writes about this when he's a small child, and he's already saying how much he loves trout fishing, and that's going to stay with him for a long time. So this is him a little bit older at the lake as well. I just think these are great. Nobody ever sees these photos, so it's something that I really do. I know that you're like, God, get on with it, but I love showing these images because they are very rarely put out to the public. It's not the Hemingway that you think you know. So these images are great. So this is him at Lake Walloon again, and he always said it was like the best rainbow trout fishing in America. The other thing he does too is when he's there, it's not just the fishing his dad loves, and again you'll see this through Hemingway's life, and we won't really focus on it for this talk. But Hemingway is also taught to hunt as a young child out at at that Windermere cottage on Lake Walloon, and he's here holding his little rifle. He's just a little wee one. But the thing about, and especially I think with the hunting, that his dad was adamant about was that if you shoot it, they would go out and they would go practice shooting, and they would just use targets for things. Okay. But he said, don't shoot animals unless you intend to eat them. Right. So his dad sort of reinforced this for years as they were hunting. There was a cottage next door with a son about Hemingway's age. And Hemingway, he recalled, because he was so mad at his dad, but his dad warned him, that's what I'll tell him, is there was the Hemingway family had a dog, and the dog used to come up to the cottage with them. Well, there was a porcupine that sort of planted some quills into the dog, and as a retaliation, Hemingway, who's older than what he is in this picture, shoots the porcupine with the friend who lives next door. Hemingway's dad made them eat it.
Oh, wow.
Hemingway's father made them eat that porcupine because he said, if you're killing an animal, you better be ready to eat it, or, like, show the environment and show that, it's okay. This is, I'm teaching you how to shoot, but you have to be respectful of the environment. So this is a lot of what his growing up was. He is going to leave. He hates where he is, except when he's at the lake. So World War I breaks out, and these are going to be more of the pictures that you're accustomed to seeing with Hemingway, right? So he's too young to enlist in World War I. And the way around that is he can join the American Red Cross as a volunteer, and you can go to the war front and serve on the war front. So this is how he circumvents him being able to. His parents would have had to sign him up, and his parents were like, no, we're not, we aren't those people, right? Like, they told him specifically, no, you need to stay home, you're safe here. And he said, no, he really wanted to go on this. What he was probably, he's 18 years old and 17 when he was trying to apply, just very young and foolish, thinking that this was going to be an adventure. But he gets in, he serves, the American Red Cross takes him. They station him in Italy, and the Red Cross is stationed within the Italian troops in a couple of different cities. And what his job is with the American Red Cross at that point, because he's young, he's not a medic, he's not a nurse, he's not being able to administer any medication, was he used to have to run from the tent that the American Red Cross had set up and bring coffee, chocolate, cigarettes, you name it, down into the trenches where the Italian soldiers were fighting. So that's what he did. That was what he was assigned to do. And one night, a mortar had come in and exploded right in the trench when Hemingway was delivering things and probably just hanging out, frankly, because it was at night. The mortar shell exploded, and the mortar exploded. There were two Italian soldiers and then Ernest, and the two Italian soldiers, the one closest to the mortar, you can imagine, did not survive that blast. The second one, is the one adjacent to Hemingway, did survive the blast, but he lost both of his legs in the blast and did not survive only a few more days. And Ernest had a bunch of shrapnel stuck in his legs and arms. And I mean, it depends which story you read that he tells. His entire, oh, his arm was about to fall off, and it wasn't. But Hemingway liked to tell people on occasion. So he struck. He ends up in a hospital in Milan for the rest of the war effort. So this is a picture. I'm sorry, there's a bar there, but this is Hemingway at the American Red Cross Hospital in Milan following this injury, and he was an ambulance driver too. So one of the cool things that we have, this is just a shout out to our museum, is that we actually have the uniform that Hemingway was wearing when that mortar went off. That's part of our collection. I know. So I'm excited for that. Come down and see it. It's on the display all the time. So I know where the shrapnel went because I can see the holes in the pants, So not all of it's true, but we do own his World War I ambulance driver uniform that was given to him by the American Red Cross to wear. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit because I want to get to the part where he's like back into his fishing. This is Pauline Hemingway. He moves to Paris. He comes back after the war, marries a gal he knows from home, moves to Paris with her. In true Ernest Hemingway style, that marriage does not last very long. And he meets Pauline, who is now going to be a second wife, at a party in Paris. Next thing you know, he's divorced from wife one, marries wife two. She's severely pregnant and doesn't want to have the kid in Paris. She's also an American from Piggott, Arkansas, and wants to go home to her family to have the baby. Well, there's not a lot of ways to move from Paris, France to Piggott, Arkansas very easily in 1927 and 1928, when they get married in 27, and she's trying to go home in 28. So they end up booking themselves on a boat, a service leaving from Paris, a liner service. Like, think about a Titanic, these beautiful ocean liners. And it went from Paris to Havana. And then Havana, you would take a little ferry over to Key West to get you to the United States. That was the easiest way for them to get into into the southern part of the United States rather than taking a boat to New York. Okay, what's going to happen when they get to Key West? The theory was Hemingway's second wife, Pauline, has a rich uncle, Gus. Her last name was Pfeiffer, and they were in the medical field. And then they changed their name slightly, so you might know them as Pfizer now, but she's of what would become the Pfizer family. The family had money. So Hemingway's second wife, Pauline, her rich uncle Gus, who dotes on her completely, and she was a working woman. She was a writer for Vogue magazine and editors, and she was doing well for herself. Uncle Gus, as a wedding present, bought them a car, a brand new Ford that they were supposed to pick up in Key West. So they were going to take the liner to Cuba, then come to Key West, and their shiny brand new car was going to be waiting, and they'd rumble up the Keys on 2 ferries because the road's not open yet, fully open yet. And then she would eventually get to Arkansas and have the baby. That doesn't happen, right? If you know anything about the Hemingway story and getting to Key West, they do all of the liner and the ferry work perfectly. They get to Key West, no car. Pauline is miserable. She is very pregnant, doesn't want to be there. This is the Ford dealership in Key West at the time, which is called the Trevmore. There was an automobile dealership on the ground floor, and the upper floors they ran as a hotel. So the automotive, the dealership was very apologetic to the Hemingways. So sorry, whatever, we'll put you up until your car gets here free of charge. This hotel is very close to the historic seaport. So Hemingway, he's trying to write during the day, which he does. His wife is miserable and pregnant, so she doesn't want to be there anymore. And I really get the feeling that Hemingway found some solace in the fishing away from Pauline while she was complaining about the car. I mean, so much so that, and she was nearly going to have the baby and the car still wasn't there yet, that they put Pauline on the overseas railway and sent her up to the mainland, and then she worked her way to Piggott, Arkansas without him and without the car. And her uncle Gus, the rich uncle, gets to Key West and drives out once the car is ready. So they're at the hotel, and sometimes Pauline's there, and then after a while Pauline's not, but the hotel is right on the historic seaport. All of the charter boats are going out there, all the fishermen are going out there, and Hemingway is a very regimented writer. He would carve out certain hours of the day for work, and then he had plenty of time for play. He was very regimented that way. So he's working on A Farewell to Arms while he's in that hotel building. And then in the afternoons, he starts wandering the seaport area, and he gets to meet some of our local charter boat fishermen. Charlie Thompson is one who they're going to be lifelong friends. I've got a picture of them. And then Charles, you'll see him written down as Bra Saunders in other places. So he walks the dock. He doesn't have his own boat. These guys are taking him out fishing, but he becomes really fast friends with the Thompsons you see here. They go on safari a lot together. And so they're smitten with the area. They're not only smitten with he's smitten with the fishing. He's smitten with this, and the worst part of it for Hemingway, I mean, not that he's on wife number 2 and she's pregnant and cranky. He comes back to an America that's in prohibition. Right. So he's a real unhappy guy. I mean, the prospect of that is pretty terrible for Hemingway at the time. But, it's the Keys. Let's face it, nobody cared about prohibition in the Florida Keys when prohibition was happening. We were getting booze coming from the Bahamas and booze coming up from Havana. So this was like the best situation for him, was to be in Key West with booze flowing, and he's fishing and his wife's gone. Right? Like he falls in love, and he swears he's going to come back because then he has to leave. Pauline has the baby. But they decide they're not going to move back to Europe. They're going to stay in the United States, and they're going to winter in Key West. They rent 2 different houses and 2 different winters. And finally, thank you, Uncle Gus, again, the car Uncle Gus, buys them the Hemingway, what you now know as the Hemingway home. Her uncle pays for the house for them. And if you've been down to Key West, and I hope you have, or at least know where it is, this is not far from the Navy base. It's not far from the seaport. This just speaks volumes to him. She's there. The house is a wreck. So she's busy all the time zhuzhing things in the house, and he's out fishing with writing in the cottage, and then he's fishing with his friends. He absolutely loves it. And he starts, I mean, this is the place that he writes some of, and it comes to the finished product of so many books that you know about Hemingway are written in that house. He really hits his stride to some degree in that house. He writes, like I said, he already written a couple of others, but he writes to Have and Have Not, which of course you know that will be part of about the Keys and fishing here, Death in the Afternoon, Green Hills of Africa. He also writes the snows of Kilimanjaro while he's there as well. So some of his really notable works are done from this house. So he's fishing and writing, and he's successful, and he's somebody. So they loved it. But I think his favorite part, aside from writing, was this idea of fishing. And he would have a litany of friends and colleagues come to Key West to fish with him. So this is Hemingway here on the left-hand side, John Dos Passos, who's a writer of note as well, in Key West with some of their, landing their catch. And a lot of these photos now are from the Presidential Library, JFK Presidential Library. There's Hemingway. This is in Cuba. This is not his boat. So what he does initially is beg, plead, and borrow from his friends. Particularly, this is Anita, which belongs to Sloppy Joe. If you're familiar, I don't know if you drink. You may have heard of a bar called Sloppy Joe. So this is Sloppy Joe's boat. So they go down, they go to Cuba. They're everywhere. I mean, they're out in the Marquesas. They're out in the Dry Tortugas. They go down to Cuba. They're going to Bimini, and they're landing some pretty big fish. And he's enjoying. He's gone for a week. 10 days, leaving Pauline at the house to deal with that. But he, instead of writing, he's just out for, sometimes up to a month, just fishing in the Florida Strait and as far over as Bimini. So he decides, and this is just a great picture of Sloppy Joe here drinking and Hemingway. And this is in Key West. I don't know what boat this is on because it's a tall ship of some sort, so we don't know. But he's back and forth all the time on the Anita, and it's annoying because he doesn't have his own boat. He's beholden to everybody else to get on these boats. So he's going to really change that pretty soon. And he writes about Sloppy Joe. I won't make you read all this, but he's so excited. He writes to his cousin. This is in 31. He comes in 28 originally, so this is 3 years later, saying basically how they're bringing in illegal alcohol as part of their fishing trips out to into Havana and back, and then you bring all this booze back and you can plop it on the overseas railway, off it goes, and then your friends are real happy on the mainland. Let's just say that. But he, also talks about the, giant marlin, these fishing villages and things. So it's he's loving this life, right? And then I'll just show you another. This is just another photo of the Anita in Cuba that he's with. Cool. I know, I'm serious, and this is what I mean. And so Hemingway, and I'll get there. But Hemingway, it's not just about these photo opportunities, about boating these fish and the photo opportunity. He's documenting everything, and I think people don't really realize that. And there's some really big fish, and he's out there, and he's kind of a ecumenical fisherman. Like he doesn't care what he's going to go catch. He's just happy to be out on somebody's boat and go catch something. So this is him and Ross Saunders, who's a local Key West charter fisherman, and Waldo Pierce, who's an artist and a writer that came to visit Hemingway pretty early on. But he's like I said, he doesn't want to be beholden to anybody else for a boat. So he orders Pilar. All right. So he's in Europe. He's coming back to Key West via New York. He goes to Scribner's, who is basically the one who's buying all his work at the time, and he goes to his editor and says, "Look, I'm going to write a story about my latest European adventure. Can you front me some money so I can go back to Key West and write the book or the short story, whatever they wanted, series of short stories?" And so they turn over this $3,000 check. They advance him the money. He doesn't leave New York. He goes right to the Wheeler Boatyard, pushes that $3,000 check over, and says, "I'll take a boat." Right. And so, but he modifies it. So this is their Playmate. It was a standard edition, but Hemingway demanded, because he had been fishing with other people on their boats, going like, what's missing? And so he ends up asking for several modifications to the boat, so he is able to do better and be better. Like most of the boats don't have live wells, so he specifically asked for a live well to be included on the boat, an extra berth so he can bring other people out on the boat. And the thing that he asked for, that it's sort of a why didn't somebody think of this earlier, especially at this time with the technology and the hand reeling, is he asked for a roller on the back of the boat. So when you were boating a large fish, you just had the roller there so it can come in a little easier. No one really had thought about that before. And that's something that Hemingway insisted that be part of the Pilar as well. It was his own boat. And the Pilar is the nickname for Pauline, his second wife. So he names the boat after her. I mean, she paid for the car and the house, so I guess he named the boat after her. So he hands over the $3,000. It ends up costing about $7,500 in total. They actually bring it down by rail to Miami. Hemingway gets up to Miami. A representative from the Wheeler shipyard comes with it. Hemingway, I think it's Bross Saunders or Charlie Thompson, one of his two friends, and Hemingway go up there, and then they bring the boat down. And he's just never off this boat, ever. It's amazing because they're, like I said, they're gone for like weeks on end. At times. So it's just another, I think, cool view. And you can, there's a laser pointer work, but you can almost make out that roller bar that he insisted being attached to the back of the boat to help boat fish. So yeah, here's some zip Pilars. This is one of my favorite. He just looks so happy. And as I say, he's on there all the time. So there's a lot of photos of Hemingway and all of his friends. He's going to be here at the helm of the Pilar. He's really very happy man when it comes right down to it, when he's on this boat. And so he has this adventure. So he has a writer friend who comes down, Mike Strader, who he kind of has this love-hate relationship with. And the two of them and another, who is Charlie Thompson, they're going to go out to Bimini. They make this plan to build fish out in Bimini. And they're going to take Pilar. It's going to be really his first big adventure in Pilar without his wife, without the kids, because now they have two now. Well, he's got three, one from the first marriage. So none of the kids are going. And he's out with Mike, who he's got this frenemy situation with. And they're going to go out. And Hemingway, by this point, is, if he wasn't already, he was a pretty heavy alcoholic. At this point, he was drinking a lot. Mike was also drinking. Anyway, they leave the dock. They're leaving Key West to make for Bimini. And at the beginning of the trip, they start just boating fish to eat, as part of their crossing over to Bimini. And they're catching fish. And Hemingway, this is 1935. Hemingway is drunk, apparently, allegedly. He's drunk. And they're heading out and they're catching fish, and there's sharks circling the boat. And Hemingway, and this is where I feel like this is where the Hemingway stories that we all hear come out. Hemingway, they don't boat the fish quick enough. Hemingway's back there trying to shoot the sharks that are circling the boat. The bullet ricochets off a metal piece of the boat, comes back and pierces both of his calves, Hemingway's.
Whoa.
This is not the first time he's cheated death. I mean, he shot himself in the leg. Essentially is what happens. The boat has to turn around. So he's really upset with himself. He's embarrassed, and it's going to become worse for him because eventually they turn around. They troll out to Bimini in the hopes of catching a marlin. They wanted to catch a marlin, and they had like a competition with one another. So Mike Strader, who's on the boat, Hemingway is not happy with him, and the feeling was pretty mutual. He knows he's hooked one. So they're trolling out there. Mike Strader knows he's hooked this huge marlin. And so this is what he says. He said, as soon as I hooked him, I knew it was a big one. Then he came out of the water walking on his tail, and it was just like a metallic blue express train bursting out of the ocean. Him and I were both excited because it was the first one we hooked, the first big marlin anywhere in Bimini had snagged, and we wanted very badly to land him. Okay, all true. So then, and the captain that they brought it was somebody local for us, was a Pinder who's related to your Pinders up here. And Hemingway, they start screaming shark. Hemingway's shooting into the ocean again, and not being helpful, right? And the end result, it's kind of a longer story, but they were really upset by what had happened because the sharks were coming because they couldn't land the fish quick enough. They didn't understand the techniques in order to really do it. And the fish was so big, and they knew they had a record fish. And when they eventually landed, I mean, look at the size of it. It's huge. But because they didn't know what they were doing, Hemingway, likely drunk again, this fish is apple cored. And if you read The Old Man in the Sea, okay, if you wonder where the inspiration for The Old Man in the Sea comes in later on, write that down on your book list too. The first fish one. It resonates so much, this story, how Mike tells it, and eventually how they land this marlin in Bimini with the fish being apple cored, and totally disqualified. And it probably would have, had they landed it, it would have been a record setting marlin. So they all get very frustrated by the situation. And Mike's pretty happy. It was still a big fish that they pulled in, but Hemingway was unhappy with the situation. So he really sets out, trying to land, I think, because of the machismo thing. This is where a lot of that, I feel, is like oozes out of Hemingway's force. Is, there is this machismo thing now that he wants to land the biggest things, but in order to land the biggest things, you have to understand the biggest things. And he really sets out to do much more scientific studying of their breeding habits, where they are, what times of year, where they like to be sighted along the Gulf Stream, what times of year, water temperature, weather, everything. Like, he really starts paying attention to these meticulous details, like almost embodying what his father had taught him back up on the lake when he was a kid, like pay attention and respect nature. So he really starts sharpening what he's doing, and starts landing some pretty big fish. And he always would say, he wrote this a lot, that he always wanted a fair contest between the fishermen and the fish, and which is, I think, ridiculous, because here's the one shooting at the sharks, just previous to this. I'm not sure that's a fair fight, but somehow he thought it was. But he starts landing, and he does it without them being cored. I think he starts getting it, and he is respected amongst the sport fishing community because of that. And then there's a couple more. I've got photos of him. And so he's really this architect in some ways of big game fishing in this area, because no one had boated anything like it. Hemingway hadn't, and he's doing really well from Pilar, and people are seeking him out and wanting to go fishing, like almost pay Hemingway to be their charter boat fisherman. He's like, no, I'm not. That's not what I'm doing. But I mean, he was that good at it, and there was a lot of articles that would appear in newspapers about him and his fishing exploits. All right, I'll just kind of skip ahead. So just another one. I mean, this is out in Bimini with the family, and this is a trip that they took the kids. There's Pauline, and the tall one is the child from his first marriage, and then the two little ones from the marriage to Pauline. So really, I mean, he's involving his family sometimes as well. And these fishing exploits kind of roll over to his writing. So not only, eventually you're going to have Old Man in the Sea, which we'll briefly look at, but first he writes To Have and Have Not, which is I think you can put that on your list too. Yeah. Okay, good. Got it. Because he writes this in 1937, and he centers it in Key West about rum running and fishing, and like the people that have money there and the people that don't. And it's really interesting, and I'm going to ask Julia to come help me. Because I've got this little a short video that's taken. They adapted the book into a movie, and it's interesting because they changed the whole dynamic. It doesn't happen in Key West anymore. Now they're off at Martinique, and they're fighting like French guerrillas, and it's kind of a big mess. But they have this clip in it, and I feel like this is and Hemingway was part of this. Julia, if I can just play this. Take it off the speaker, right? Sorry, she's my.
Watch it, Johnson. Make your strike. Put on a little more drag. Not too much. You're gonna have to sock him. He's gonna jump anyway. All right, hit him again now. Hit him 3 or 4 times. Stick it into him. Better get the other teaser in. I got him. He's up on that drag. He's gone. No, he's not. He's up on that drag. Quick! He wants to go. Let him go. He's gone. Oh, he's hooked good. He sure is. You reel him in. No, I'm sure he's gone. I'll tell you when he's gone. Reel him set. Well, he's gone now. Yes, sir.
Feels like with the fish and listening to your captains and knowing, respecting that animal. And so I know he had a hand when the film eventually was made. So I just enjoy showing that because I really feel Hemingway would have loved that scene. Going, you're an idiot. You're a rich man on charter boat captain, and you're not listening to what I'm telling you. And I know these waters and I know these animals. And so Hemingway, here's why I think he's like really underrated in this part. So I think all of this is not common knowledge, but certainly it's expected of Hemingway. But what's really cool about him, I think, is the fact that he used to keep these fishing books, and they are meticulous in their details. And these have been poured over by scientists in communities, and ours especially, weather forecasting, who's on the boat, what they caught, how much things weighed. So you can see some of these details, and I won't, there's a couple inches. So, Ernest Hemingway, Key West, Florida. So that's in the front cover. And then there's these inside of these journals where he keeps all these details about the fish that he caught, where he was, who owed him gas money for going out on the boat, like, which I respect that. But you're rich, man. Take your friends out fishing. Sorry, though. Like who came, who caught what. And there's just a couple of examples. I zoomed in on some pages, right? Heavy swell. I may highlight some of these. I did. Okay. Where he was fishing: Gulf Stream, 2 sharks, 5 mackerel, 5 grouper, 5 barracuda. Heavy swell in the PM. Who was with them? Charlie Thompson. I don't know who that's supposed to be in the middle, and then EH is him. So he keeps these meticulous records. So these are really fantastic as a research tool. They're up at the JFK Library. They've not been digitized. We requested these years and years ago. And there he is. I gave Brock $6 for gas. So I mean, like, he's keeping these, an insane amount of detail. And he's also not given a lot of credit for being what I would consider being a naturalist. So in August of 1940, he is named vice president of what is now the IGFA, right? So the big game fishing. So he is made vice president for not just because he's Hemingway, but because he really is holding up to what that agency's standards are, for this, conservative, between this conservation is when you're out there, just catch and release. He's kind of a big fan by then. And the detail that he records in his journals and things, because he passes them on to different organizations. He's actually, because of his connection or the details that he's recording and sending to everybody that he can find, there's a gentleman, Mr. Cadwallader, who is in charge of the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. He actually writes to Hemingway and says, can my lead scientist and I come to Key West and spend a week on Pilar with you, because we want to be able to better identify billfish in that area. And so Hemingway thinks this is the biggest compliment he's ever been given anytime. So he says, sure, come on down. We'll make arrangements. Come for a week. He ends up keeping them here for a month and a half, taking them everywhere. Dr. Fowler and Cadwallader are here for a long time, and he's out on the boat. He's taking them as far as Bimini and Cuba, and going out to the dry Tortugas, and really just to study marlin. And he's handing them all the information that he's captured over the years. And during his visit, Fowler, who was really credited with identifying, not here, but just in his career, 25,000 different species of fish. So the person who comes down and is with Hemingway is no slack. He's a very important man in that community. And Hemingway, the doc, they come down and Hemingway keeps telling him, he's like, there's not one type of marlin. There are different types of marlin. And the Academy's telling him, no, we've only been able to identify one. And Hemingway's, no, there's not. And by the time this visit is over, the doctor goes back up to Philadelphia and writes him and says, thank you so much. We were able to actually identify several species, and credits Hemingway in their records for being able, like, the first one to officially identify in a scientific institution that of these other species exist, because he had paid attention so much to the fish themselves in the environment. So they record everything. And Hemingway, they leave, and he calls them the scientificos. That's how he refers to them in every book. He's like, yeah, the scientificos are here. They're in his fishing journals as the scientificos. He is, when they catch things, and even when they're here, even when they go back, Hemingway is still sending them letters about, like, how big of the marlin he caught, the stomach contents of the marlin when he catches it. Like, he is really paying attention, and it's gratifying to him to send this information to the Scientific Academy for them to be able to record that information. So yeah, I said he starts sending these letters. So this is a copy of one of the letters that was sent up to the thing. It's amazing what they do. And he's like describing fish, like, hey, you didn't see this on your trip, but I found this, and I don't think it's in your catalog, right? And so catches a tuna that he's sure that the scientificos have never seen before. And he explains this in his letter about what it looks like. The fish was, life was a dark purple on the back, opalescent on the flanks and belly with a gold rather than silver shine. The fins were purple, blue on the top and so forth. So he's sending, like, what this fish looked like in life. And he says to them, like, if it's already in your collection, because he sends them the fish. He not only sends them the letter, but he sends them the fish and says, if you already have this in your collection, I suggest you don't eat it. Don't eat this one if you already have another one. Which is, it's like pure Hemingway at its finest. So yeah, that's what he says. If you don't want him as a specimen, he gets there in good shape. Wash the soul out of him, cut the meat off both sides and the backbone and broil it. And again, like he's joking, but so this is in the collection of the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, is that tuna that Hemingway mailed up to Philadelphia for them to keep in their collection. And it says by Ernest Hemingway circa 1935. So they kept it because they didn't have it. It wasn't identified in their collection. They didn't broil the tuna and eat it. I guess is the end result of that. But again, and he submits a lot of his records about from his fishing journals as well. And they correspond regularly, the Scientificos and Hemingway. They keep passing letters back and forth about what the Academy's added to their collection since the last time Hemingway would have visited. So he's really engaged in all of this. They appreciate all of this data that he is able to give them, that they actually name a fish for Ernest Hemingway, a new species of fish. It's a spiny-cheeked scorpion fish, and its scientific name is named for Hemingway as a thank you for all the work he had done in passing this information up to the Academy for his contributions to marine science and his want to, the study of fish. It's really, again, I think people just don't realize that he's so involved. I'll wind it down. And thinking about him as a sport fisherman, I just like his picture because this is the Hemingway I want the lookalike contest to be after. Just ask him. This could be possible. And he's really proud of what he's done. I mean, he writes to people in personal letters. It doesn't come up in his books, and I think that's what people know Hemingway for, or his books, or his drunken exploits, or the safaris and things. But his private letters that he sends back and forth are mainly about fishing and what he's doing while he's living here. And not only living here, because eventually he moves on to wife number 3. And again, just look at how happy he is on Pilar. But he also finds something else to do in Key West, which is Martha Gellhorn, his third wife. So he breaks up with Pauline, and then this is Martha and Finca Vieja right outside of Havana in Cuba. So he marries Martha. But I don't know if she thought the boat was coming but it did. Pilar went to Cuba, and he's there fishing all the time. Because he knows he's on the same waters that he's known and loved and fished for a long time. So he's got that boat there. When he leaves Key West in 1939, he's back and forth because he still has business in the United States. But being in Cuba, he's still in the place that he loves, even though it's beyond the Key West time, if you will. And then he uses Pilar. It's always just a funny story that he fits his boat out. Actually, the Navy gives him a bunch of equipment, and he's a U-boat sub hunter during World War II on Pilar. So he's out there fishing, and he's hoping that a U-boat would mistake him. He's also really, really having some mental health issues at this time and drinking a lot, so more than he had before. And so he thought if they were out there fishing and a U-boat surfaces and kind of pesters them, that they'd be ready to take out the U-boat. How do you get that? Whatever, I don't know. But so he's out there fishing all the time and hunting U-boats as well. But he knew the waters, and he sold him. I mean, the Navy handed over grenades, machine gun to him to mount to the boat. So they took him as a valid human that could really help out. Right. So to wind down, because I think this fishing is still going to carry on. He's starting to get a little bit older. He's probably not on a Pilar anymore, but he takes those stories, that Mike Strader story of that cord fish, and he's living in Cuba, and he writes The Old Man in the Sea, which is published in 1952, all about fishing and that fight again. If you read it, I harken back to high school if that's the last time you read that book. But it's so fascinating that man, versus nature story, and who can be stronger, and who's going to win out in the end. And it really was, I think, in some ways, so autobiographical for Hemingway, and they don't look at it necessarily that way. Is that they think it's an homage to his Gutierrez, his fishing captain in Cuba, but I really do feel like this is more autobiographical than people give it credit for. And he's awarded the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for in 1953, which is a huge deal, especially for Hemingway. But he's going to keep on fishing even when he gets older, and the kids are a lot older. He's still going to be fishing in Cuba, so much so that he's still living in Cuba. And the government proposes, this is pre-Castro. The government proposes that because they love Hemingway, they love what he's doing for the sport fishing community in Cuba, which really had not existed very much, because people were there for different reasons, mostly more cosmopolitan reasons than Havana. So they really credit Hemingway for bringing sport fishing to Cuba, and they asked him if they could name a fishing tournament after him in Cuba, and he says okay, because it's Hemingway, he doesn't turn things down without his name on it, whatever. So he goes out fishing. Now, the first 3 years of the competition, he wins it all 3 years. Mildly unfair, but yeah, he wins it. He wins it three years in a row, and then one of the last years he competes. Actually, Fidel Castro competes and wins, which I believe was fixed, but that's a whole other story. Wow. But they still do this fishing tournament every. I think they do it every other year. Last year, the information you cannot really find it. They keep it very closed-lipped because they invite people to participate rather than an open registration, given the climate. And last time we know it happened was May of 2024. So this is still a very much ongoing fishing tournament, and it goes out of the Ernest Hemingway Marina in Havana. So again, you see how much they really do appreciate him. And I think I'll just, I can be pretty almost finished, I guess, right? So he just loves fishing, and I hope that this is giving you maybe a better understanding of the other part of Hemingway and his fishing. He's not just out there; he is trying to catch the biggest fish. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when he does catch the biggest fish, he's intent on really studying what it is and making a contribution. And a lot of the time, especially a little bit later in life, he's doing catch and release, and he was a big champion of the catch and release program. Unless it was the biggest thing you caught. And there's not a lot of pictures of Hemingway later in life. If you don't think of, I do, because I'm a nerd and I look for these things. But if you look for pictures of the older Hemingway, with a giant marlin, they're very hard to find. And that's because he's releasing at sight and you don't have the cameraman coming out with you on board Pilar. So later in life, people just think he's not fishing as much or, he's not boating anything large. He absolutely is. You have to look in his journals to get that information, but he is catch and release for the most part at that point and was a big advocate for it. And that's why you don't see that much later in life, but it's something that goes on behind the scenes that I really wish people paid a little bit more attention to. But I think from coming from this this young kid learning how to fish on Lake Walloon to be vice president of the IGFA for almost 20 years. Hemingway did a lot for the sport of fishing, but also conservation and science. So I think I'll cut it there.
It kind of foreshadowed what you talked about as meticulous documentation. It went by quickly, but in that slide with that little, I don't know if it was a letter or just a little card where he written, the last sentence says, "My favorite studies in the school are English, zoology, and chemistry."
Yeah.
Like a little kid.
And he is, I think he's just, when you ask little kids, I mean, he's that kid that you ask them what they wanted to be when they grew up. That he's one of the ones who actually said, "I want to be this," and was. Right?
Did.
Instead of everybody wants to be an astronaut, everybody wants to be a doctor, he knew what he wanted to do and what he was attracted to from a young age. And I think having that opportunity, that's why I focus so much, I think, on that early part of his life, because he is so into it back then. It's not coming here that instills it, because he's certainly not fishing in Paris, right? When he's living over there, or when he's a war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War. I mean, he really is attracted to fishing and from a very young age, and it sticks with him his entire life. And even when he's up in Idaho, he's fishing while he's up there as well. So it's very true to who he is.
So when you do get a question from the room, just make sure you repeat it so the people on Zoom.
About the Zoom thing.
That's okay. And I do have a couple questions from our Zoom participants. So one asks, what are your thoughts on Samuelson's book With Hemingway? He talks a lot about the Pilar and his different fishing adventures.
Yeah, I mean, the book does a really good job, I think, of describing. I don't need to repeat the question. Everybody heard you, right? Okay, good. I think Hemingway does a really good job understanding what the Pilar meant to him, because it's symbolic of a lot of other things too. It's not just talking about the length and the beam and all the equipment on there. Like, it really does delve into what that boat means to Hemingway and what that boat allows him to do, making contributions. I think to the greater fishing world, because without that boat, I mean, certainly, he couldn't have kept borrowing his friend's boats. So certainly, to me, that Pilar changed his life.
Okay. My other question from Zoom was, are you able to put to rest the story about Hemingway having spent time at the Northwest Passage Lighthouse?
Oh, God. Who's that? Well, there's this BS story. I'm just going to say it's total. There is a small lighthouse that's in Key West and no longer is there. It was, I think it was lit in 1871, 1872. I'm not sure of the date, but it marks the Northwest channel into Key West. Everybody uses the Southwest channel into Key West for the most part, but there is one from Florida Bay coming into Key West. And it was you ever seen those stilted homes like in Miami-Dade, right? So it sort of looked like that, where it was up on these iron piles in a little house, and then the light was on top of the house. So it was a lighthouse, but it looked very similar. So the story always goes that Hemingway actually, so if you go online, which, everything's true on the internet, I suppose. But people say that's Hemingway's second home, that he lived in this lighthouse, that he would, leave Pauline and go fishing from there. I have no doubt that Hemingway used it to go fishing right in that channel if he wanted to stay somewhere close, but it's really not in the best part of like our area to go fishing, so I don't really see that. And he never lived, it was never his home. So if that was, I don't know what the end result was for the question person, but it's not. Everybody calls it the Hemingway home on stilts, and it's not. not at all. And then it burnt to the ground in like 1971, really mysteriously. But I think the square group are related, but that's just my little cynicalness there.
I have a question on Hemingway's father. So Hemingway, he instilled a lot of these practices and a lot of the thought in the conservation to him when he was his child. As Hemingway grew older, was he still around? Was he able to see the kind of the fruits of those, seeds that he planted as a child?
Yeah. So the question was, what happened to Hemingway's dad? And how important was he in influencing the rest of his life? I mean, Hemingway really didn't like his dad at all. They had a pretty cantankerous relationship. I mean, he appreciated how strong his father was. And I think that he appreciated the belief systems that he instilled in them, but they were like chalk and cheese. They just never really got along very well. And when he had to move home after the First World War, like he hated living there, and his father would impose all these rules on him. So they were never really close. He did like his mother a little bit more, but he's not a long-term family man. And there's with Hemingway's eventual demise, there's a lot of what I think people can view now as mental health issues kind of permeating that family, because his dad also commits suicide as well. So, there's something there, but I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't want to say, something that I shouldn't, but there's a lot going on in that relationship. So not later in life as much, but I think he appreciated the stuff from the younger period. Yes, sir.
The real Pilar is in Cuba,
Correct.
not Bass Pro.
Correct. Cuba. It's on the tennis court at Finca Vieja. Yeah. But I think this is a pretty good replica. I think it's not bad. And it's
cool. A lot going on.
Built in the same boatyard.
Yeah, exactly. It was built in the same boatyard to Hemingway's extra specifications. But yeah, the original is sitting on the tennis court at Hemingway's Cuba residence, covered. So at least there's that going for it. But it's deteriorating, and the Cuban government a few years ago, we had the curator and director of the Finca Vieja home, because they did some document transfers a few years ago to get some papers that belong to Hemingway back to the United States, so they can go to the JFK Library in Boston, so they can be digitized and people have access to them. There was some deal that they came to the U.S. and they said they had money allocated from the government to maybe have a boat restorer go. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't know that they have. I'm sure they have professionals there to do it, but getting it done to a good standard, I don't know. So it just sits. It's not in terrible shape, I have to say, for all the years of use. And his lack of maintenance on a lot of the time, it's actually in pretty okay shape for now, but I haven't seen it for a while.
Speaking of the boat, he changed wives. Was he ever tempted to change the name?
I would wonder if Martha would make him, but no, it was Pilar. He never changed the name of the boat. Never I don't know if he was tempted, but he never did. He changed his third wife though to the fourth one. So I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have been Martha for too long, and then it would eventually have to be Mary. I don't know. Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The History of Diving Museum would like to thank you for coming
Oh.
down. We give you an annual membership, and hopefully you'll be able to bring family and friends and come up to the History of Diving Museum to spend some more time in the exhibit. We
Yeah,
appreciate you.
thanks for having me.
And we'll be here for a few minutes. If you have any more questions, we can come up. We are a nonprofit, so if you enjoyed tonight and are able to help us continue the free presentations, we do have a little donate bucket on your way out. And if you'd like to help with the chair brigade, we're also going to put all those away tonight. So thank you for coming. Yes.
Thank you.